and go to 37. In this diagram, it just shows the value, the percentage of the GDP of those countries, Japan, Germany, USA, and the rest. What are the values of the knowledge of those services and products on their GDP? It's almost 50% in Germany. God knows how much in the Arab world or in the GCC countries. We'll come and describe this soon. The GCC countries actually scored a relatively high index in terms of knowledge. As you can see, Saudi 5.96, Bahrain 6.9, and UAE almost 7. We are actually very close to Korea. How come our products and production is not similar to Korea, Bahrain, or Saudi? There is a clue here. And if you can see Sweden, the index 9.4, USA 8.7, Brazil and India is a 3.0. No, go to China, which is most exporter, if not the second, if not the first, is the second most exported country worldwide. It's only 4.37. But this is only an index. This is not the value of the products. Great. So if we map this against GDP per capita, and the index itself, you can see how where we are, UAE, Saudi, and Bahrain. If we push ourselves to here, or push ourselves to here, in both cases, we will be in line with the people, but we have an odd position. We have high index, we have low production. We have high index, we have low production. Why? This is the reason. When we compare Singapore, Tunisia, and Saudi Arabia in terms of high-tech exports, we found that ourselves, means GCC and the Arab world, have one of the lowest high-tech percentage in terms of our exports. Yes, we produce oil. We produce energy-intensive based products. We produce probably agriculture in the agriculture countries like Syria and so on. But where is the technology? Where is the knowledge that add value to our products? This is how we can see where we are and where the others, the Singapore, the 650 square kilometers, Bahrain, by the way, is 700. We are more than Singapore by 50 kilometers square. However, this all depends on the way of our production. Now, if we want to know what is the high and high-medium technology industries required, what are they? Of course, they require R&D, and those based on the ISIC classification, the high technology, pharmaceutical, aircrafts, or whatever, this is the classification. And I would like just to give some explanation on those. The knowledge-based industries, one of them is the creative industry. I call it CI, which depends on the business activities based on skills and talent, advertisement, architectural, and so on. Knowledge-intensive business services, KIBS. Again, this is operation reliant on professional knowledge, human resources. Technology-intensive industries implementing high degree of research and produce products. So fair enough. We speak about the definition and the index of knowledge. Let us a little bit see the SMEs. Why? SMEs actually present the highest percentage of all business enterprises, and it is across sectors. Yani, you can find SMEs a baker, you can find SMEs an R&D, you can find an SMEs salon, hairdresser, and you can find SME working with a very high-tech engineering products. This is very important slides. Actually, I call it kind of a major slide in terms of knowing the performance. Number of enterprises in Bahrain, whenever we say Bahrain, we can say GCC, because the performance and the business model of Bahrain and the rest of the GCC is almost same. We are 99.4% of 46,000 enterprises, or let's say 47,000 enterprises in Bahrain. In Europe, the same figure, 99.7. So we are performing almost the same. Of 20 million, of South Korea is the same. Number of employees, see the paradox here. The number of employees, 74% actually on the SMEs, not in the large industries in Bahrain, and same thing in the GCC. But only 14% are Bahrainis. SMEs are not able to employ high skill or Bahrainis or local people. We'll come there. Why? We'll see. And in Europe, 67, God knows how much are the local of European working in SMEs, but I can bet it's very high. And 87 in Korea. In terms of contribution to GDP, only 28%, and this is very optimistic in Bahrain. We have the highest among the GCC. In Saudi Arabia is the lowest, which is below 20. And same thing in Europe, 58, more than double, and South Korea. Export, SMEs export only 8%, only 8% outside the border of Bahrain. Export in Europe, the products in South Korea, I don't have the figure of Europe, but I'm sure it is within the South Korea range, which is about 56. So means our SMEs are not effective enough. I need some time. And the micro, which I hinted before, actually represent 87 of the total SMEs. Micro means have less than 10 employees. 91 in Europe and 94 in the rest. And there is a major, there is one of the studies done on but I just want to mention here, SMEs actually contributes about 10% to local employments and less than the 10% to exports. Local SMEs has low contribution to GDP and the rest. I need to rush a little bit. Comparing to the European countries, the production, you will see the contribution of SMEs, which is in blue, is usually higher than the large. Again, this is a comparison between some countries worldwide. Where is Bahrain located in terms of index, but not in terms of production. So majorly proportional relationship between added value services, products, and employability. How can employ? There is a proportional relationship. And local SMEs in GCC are not able to attract local employees due to its inability to provide high salaries and high skilled job. It is not able to do this. Business model of employment in SMEs should be changed. Local owner and expatriate employees and their relationship to impact the growth of local employment. Current SMEs development program and initiatives are not effective. And government should develop innovation and knowledge. Now, let's go for the policies, and I would like to rush a little bit here. The policies, for instance, in Korea, it depends on financial subsidies of all sectors and large enterprises. What I try to say here in this slide, how they improve innovations, knowledge in their products and their production. The South Korean, for instance, they enable large industries called chaebols to develop their products. It's a big story. We will not explain it here. Encouraging FDIs, supporting SMEs, attracting high venture capital industry, and supporting industrial patents. Same thing for Singapore, that we saw that slide, why their exports actually exceeding our countries, depending on increasing competitiveness and value-added products and services. Government intervenes to encourage target industry, niche industries, orienting education toward industry and skill developments, encouraging clustering, encouraging FDIs, encouraging high-tech. And one of the examples that we share same culture like Malaysia, depending on integrating its knowledge industries and increasing its competitiveness and FDIs, developing production capabilities, encouraging FDIs, developing in-house training, and so on. But who is responsible of science and technology policy in our countries like Saudi, like Egypt, for instance, or Tunisia? Is the KACST in Saudi Arabia and CERS in Tunisia, but no proactive industry involvement of policymakers. So they don't involve in creating or intervening on the production. They do have good programs in terms of R&D, researches, but it does not interlink with the manufacturing engine. And again, policies of Arab world in general and in GCC countries in specific are not intervening in developing knowledge value addition to their industries. The FDIs in GCC countries derived by resources and by incentives, like FDIs and oil and gas and so on. Incentives policies of GCC countries depend on subsidized land, gas, tax, and labor, and there is no directive incentive toward certain industries. In the developed countries or the tiger countries, they have a very directive incentives. If you come to work in my country, I will give you 1, 2, 3, 4 incentives. It's not just open-ended like the policies in the Arab world. Ministries of education are the responsible body of science and technology policies. And industries have no leading role. The science and technology policies of GCC countries concentrate on developing R&D with no coordination with the industry and trading and the rest of the talk here. This is a patent. See our patents, and most of the patents in the developed world doesn't come from universities or from science and technology centers, come from companies. This is the fact. 50,000, there are more and increasing above 100,000 on USA and Germany, more than in the Saudi Arabia, for instance, very humble, 200. In Turkey, the situation is better. If you compare the patents in the Arab world and the rest, like China, the one that has little of KI, remember? Little index. But see how the patents they produce, 112,000 patents in 2011, comparing to GCC, best one is 17. There's a problem here. That means our productivity, our industries are not contributing toward knowledge. Actually, we are producing based on a lump sum equipments buy from somewhere to cater the consumables society. Again, those are the sectors like electrical machineries, engines, organic machines, so on. If we get a citation, roadmap of scientific citation in Netherlands, look at this. Biotechnology, researches, and cancer. Look at their patents. Medical system, flowers. Netherlands, they do researches in flowers. We can do something close to flowers in GCC as well. They do in coating, in cars, in energy, in electrotechnical products. Look at the South Korea, organic chemistry, Asian medicine. Those are the citation. And those are the roadmap of the industrial patents in South Korea. Printing, display, chips, information devices, coating. When the Soviet Union collapsed, most of their expertise has been exported to South Korea to keep working on their products. This is a roadmap of some of the business intensive or business knowledge-based activities. I will not go through this, but I would like to go to our major slide. Now, GCC economic policies should develop capabilities. And what are the capabilities? Is the labor cost, skill base, R&D, infrastructure, government. And this is the point that I would like to speak about. We call this capabilities, where the output of this capability, we call it the performance, the KPIs, the growth in export, the high-tech shares, medium technology performance. And look at this. When we compare between this is based on the global production scoreboard, when the labor cost is still in Saudi Arabia, the cost is the lowest, but not means that when you have the lowest labor means you have the better technology. This is a trick also. Means there is a non-balance in case. For the Singapore, the cost of the labor is the highest, and skills, again, the Singapore is the highest. In terms of R&D, the Singapore is the highest. In terms of infrastructure, Singapore is the highest. In terms of government policies and intervenes, is the highest. We call this all capabilities. And the industrial capability, we can see, is the highest, and therefore, the high-tech share on export, Singapore is the highest. Again, this is, we call it a leapfrog, a short-term, and there's a long-term. A short-term policy where the government can concentrate in certain industries and then to implement those strategies and then enable the industry. For instance, if we would like to be one of the highest on the chemicals, pharmaceutical products, we have a roadmap of such as a government, and we can concentrate on one of these activities, and we can get the production. Last and not least, and a final slide, the government in GCC can utilize its conducive knowledge environment by directing investment and business activities toward high-value services and production, by organized labor market, and this is what we are seeing in Bahrain, alhamdulillah, and the rest of the GCC, by education toward certain production, innovation and R&D capacity, soft and hard infrastructure, and govern policies. We call it this enabling. The consequences, we will get a growth in exports, niche market, more skilled labor, added value products. We call this a growth, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Al-Qahtani. Now I'd like to call Mr. Amr Rubai, who is the Dean of College of Business and Finance at Ahliya University.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I first would like to thank the organizer for this conference, and I specifically would like to name Professor Tariq Sharif for working so hard and for putting so much time to make this conference a reality. And I also would like to thank him for extending this invitation to me and for giving me this opportunity and privilege to be here this morning to speak rather about a very important topic, the knowledge-based economies and SMEs. And I would like to also thank Dr. Qahtani because he made my presentation much easier by basically highlighting some of the important elements that enters into the knowledge-based economy. Now you are probably all of you aware that in the last 20 or 30 years, and because of globalization and rapid advancement in modern technologies, there's a new economy emerged. And that economy is called a knowledge-based economy. And as the title states clearly, a knowledge-based economy simply means that we have an economy driven basically by knowledge. And unlike the traditional economies where capital and labor were the most important ingredient and factor of production, today knowledge has become the key driver not only as a factor input in production, but also as an important factor for wealth creation and job creation. And this is exactly what we need in this part of the world. You see, those of you who are familiar with the literature of the United Nations and the World Bank, the latest report of the World Bank states clearly that by 2030, the Arab countries need to create 150 million jobs. And this is one of the greatest challenges facing not only the Arab world, but also the developing countries in general. Now, knowledge has become crucial and critical. Now, knowledge is not something new. Knowledge existed. You see, we in the Arab world are very proud that we had knowledge at one sometime in the past. We are proud that we are driving big cars. We are proud we're using highly sophisticated telephone. And I tell sometimes students, look, tell me, is the car that brought you here, how much you contributed to this car and to the telephone that you have, the TV that you have at home, or even this nail that you hang your coat? So in reality, and if I wanted basically to follow up on what Dr. Qahtani has told us, and if I wanted to say, do we have knowledge in the Arab world? And my answer, and you can challenge me on that, no. You see, and the reason for that is that we are not yet into the knowledge economy. We are not yet in the process of producing knowledge. We are not a creative and innovative people. You see, we are consumers of knowledge and we are consumers of technology. Almost everything we have. Even when you look at the macro dimension of our economies, you see, 50 years ago, oil accounted for about 60 or 65% of our gross national product. Today, oil accounts for about 80 and 85% of, let's say, gross national product. So we have not been able basically to generate knowledge and create knowledge in order to help us at least to move and leap into the 21st century. And the challenges facing many countries today, and in particular the developing countries, is that knowledge has become a public good or a global good. Knowledge is available. And the challenge for many countries is basically how to have access to this global knowledge. So that's why in the literature they always talk about building capacity for knowledge creation. But we also need to understand what are these foundations, what are these pillars that we need to put in place in order to be able to produce and create knowledge. And I'm going to go quickly about some of these foundations. And I'm going to explain that none of these foundations are basically exist in our own societies, in our own countries. Knowledge is crucial and critical. As a matter of fact, those of you who are familiar with Abu Hamid al-Ghazali in his Ihya, he said that God gave Sulaiman three choices: knowledge, power, and money. And Sulaiman chose knowledge, and as a result of that, he was able to get the other two. So knowledge at the end of the day is the most important factor. And today, those of you who are familiar with the globalization, with the future development of, let's say, many countries, in particular in South Korea, Singapore, as he mentioned, the secret success of these countries is that basically they produce knowledge. And it's very important that we also need to understand how did this knowledge being created. And among other things, of course, and I'm going to explain later on, that one of the most important dimensions of a success of any society is education. And that's why, again, those of you who are familiar with the World Bank literature, they tell you that the greatest resource of any nation, not the oil and gas that you have, not the land, not the mineral, but the people of that nation. So that's why those countries who don't invest in people, those people will have no chance of becoming successful. And they will continue to be. And that's why the role of education in this knowledge-based economy, because I know Professor Tariq Sharif has a paper about innovation, because one of the key, again, important element of the knowledge-based economy is innovation. As a matter of fact, again, those of you who are familiar with the literature, we're not much talking today about knowledge-based economy. We're talking about creative economy. We simply mean knowledge is not enough, but you need to be creative in order to be able to become successful. See, just think of yourself. How can you compete in the global market against countries like South Korea, against Singapore? Finland is a good example, and I am going to give you some of the features of why Finland, for example, in a very short period in time, was able to convert its economy from a natural resource base into a knowledge-based economy. So that's why when we look at the Arab world and we'll try to assess the creation of knowledge, the importance of knowledge, the use of knowledge, we can clearly see that we are still far behind and we are not really making a progress toward transforming our economies into a knowledge-based economies. Now, change is very important. I'm going to go very quickly to what I have, and this is from Charles Darwin. Some of you may not like Darwin, but that's exactly what he said. It is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. And we have to change. You see, and that's why one of the important impediments in our society for not being able to change, that we have not been able to develop a culture. So again, one of the important elements when it comes to knowledge-based economy, we need to have a dynamic and a creative culture. And we don't have that culture. And this is one of the, of course, issues that discussed, and this is for you if you want to know more about the knowledge deficit in the Arab world. The United Nations published the 2003, the Arab Human Development Report. And in that report, they came to the conclusion that the Arab world is not producing enough knowledge in order to be able to meet some of the important challenges facing them in the 21st century. Then, Peter Drucker, and all of you probably have heard, the basic economic resource is no longer capital, nor natural resources, nor labor. It is and will be knowledge. So knowledge at the end of the day will basically determine the progress of a nation. And knowledge are important for a variety of reasons, and I'm not going to go into detail to explain why we need knowledge. Knowledge is the source of wealth creation. We simply mean a challenge for the developing countries, those who don't have natural resources. Now they can make use of the existing knowledge in order to be able to create wealth and generate jobs. If you want to compete in the global market, you can only compete on the basis of the knowledge that you have. So if you don't have the knowledge, and I think Dr. Qahtani said it very well, when it comes to the high-tech export, in total export that we have very little. It's about 1.5 or 2% of our total export are classified into this category. We simply mean we are not producing enough knowledge in order to be able to export. Now, labor market flexibility is crucial and critical for the knowledge-based economy. When I say you have to adapt to change, you adapt to change through the flexibility of the labor market. You have to catch up. And that's why education and trainings become crucial and become important. Then enhancement of people capabilities. And that's the key fundamental question in human development. You see, the concept of development is no longer about, let's say, social and economic development. which simply mean the emphasis on human development, which simply mean the emphasis on man, on people. And education and health have become critical for the development of any society. So knowledge will help you to increase your capabilities to become a citizen and a useful citizen to contribute to the development. Creation of indigenous knowledge. And here it is also very important to keep in mind. You see, many countries in the world, and came out of a report of the OECD recently, they ask a simple question: why in the last 50 years, very few countries were able to develop? And they answered that question themselves by saying that these countries, they adopted our model. So that's why adopting and copying a model of another country may not necessarily achieve the ultimate objectives of that. And that's why, without using your indigenous knowledge, it will be very difficult for the country basically to move forward. Your cultures, your religion, your tradition, your way of life, these are also important components. And they could influence the process of knowledge creation. Empowering the society with core skills and making decisions. And this is another important element, because the knowledge-based economy demands high-skilled labor. You see, the knowledge-based economy is about ideas. It's not about physical natural resources. And that's why education, again, becomes important, because it will help us to understand and create ideas. And then when we speak later on about innovation, where do innovation comes from? Come from the creations of new ideas. And then to facilitate communication and exchange ideas, eradicate poverty, and this is again a challenge. Globally, they always tell you that you will never have peace and security unless you solve the problem of poverty. And unfortunately, we live in a world that is divided between very few who are rich and super rich. But the majority of the world population are poor. Almost 80% of the world population are living in the developing countries. And these basically suffer from poverty and disease, and promote peace and understanding. Now, when trying to define what is really a knowledge-based economy, are those whose citizen communities, enterprises, and organizations have the ability to access. You see, if you don't have knowledge, you can access to knowledge. Today, knowledge, as I mentioned before, is a global good and is available to everybody. Assimilate, adapt, create, constantly renew, package and diffuse, advocate for the application of knowledge. That's why in the knowledge-based economy, if you want to create a society that is based on knowledge, and if you want to transfer your economy from a resource base, then you have to think in terms of absorbing knowledge, applying knowledge, and ultimately creating knowledge. And apply knowledge to facilitate economic and social development. Now, the foundation for the knowledge economy, and it was well said by Dr. Qahtani, well-educated population, including building a skill, and this is important. You need a national innovation system, because knowledge is about creating new ideas and adding value to the national output. Of course, you need to advance the cause of science and technology, and then you need an institutional structure. We simply mean today development is so complex, and without well-defined, efficient institution, it will be very difficult to have a knowledge-based society. So the institutional structure of the state is crucial. And then you need, of course, a dynamic ICT. And knowledge today can be shared. Knowledge can be exchanged. And the tool that has been used in exchange and sharing knowledge is the ICT. So one of the foundations for building a knowledge economy is the ICT. Now, the features of the knowledge economy is, again, innovation, is an economy of networks. It's accompanied by a new form of organization involving a relation between public and private sector. And here we are talking about SMEs. You see, our economies in this part of the world, 80% of which is dominated by government business. And that's why if you want to build a knowledge-based economy, you have to move out of this dominance by allowing SMEs to contribute to the national economy. And here where the SMEs can add value through knowledge creation and their contribution to the economy. You need the human skills, and then information is necessary for all sectors in the economy. And of course, knowledge, as I mentioned before, is challenging even this concept of scarcity in economics, because knowledge appreciates in value.